The Forrester Christmas party was designed to feel timeless, as if warmth itself had been curated and wrapped in tradition. Soft lights glowed against familiar walls, evergreen branches were arranged with deliberate care, and the scent of pine and baked spices lingered in the air like a promise of comfort. Eric and Donna had spared no detail, determined to create a sanctuary from the turbulence that had shadowed the family for months. This gathering was meant to restore a sense of continuity, a reminder that despite professional upheaval, shifting alliances, and unspoken fears, the heart of the family still beat within these walls. Yet beneath the carefully constructed atmosphere, tension lay hidden, subtle but pervasive, waiting for the slightest crack to reveal itself. Eric moved through the room with practiced ease, his smile steady, his presence reassuring. To the untrained eye, he appeared unchanged, the patriarch anchoring his family with the same quiet authority he had always possessed. But Donna, watching him closely, could see the effort behind every gesture. She noticed the pauses he tried to disguise, the moments when his energy faltered before he gathered it again. Her concern was not just for his health, though that weighed heavily on her, but for the emotional cost of his gradual retreat from Forrester Creations. Eric had built his identity alongside the company, and even as he accepted the necessity of stepping back, the loss lingered like a grief he refused to name. Donna compensated with vigilance, hovering just enough to reassure herself without undermining his dignity. Brooke and Ridge arrived carrying their own version of hope. Their closeness radiated familiarity, a sense of having weathered storms and emerged believing in their future once more. For them, the evening represented stability, a reaffirmation that love, when chosen repeatedly, could endure even the most relentless cycles of doubt and betrayal. Brooke allowed herself to relax, leaning into the illusion that this Christmas might mark a turning point, not just for her relationship with Ridge, but for the family as a whole. Ridge shared that optimism, convinced that clarity and commitment had finally aligned in his life. Neither of them anticipated how fragile that confidence truly was. When Deacon and Taylor arrived together, the mood shifted almost imperceptibly. They did not announce themselves with drama, yet their presence carried weight. The tension between them was subtle but unmistakable, the kind that comes from unresolved conflict rather than overt hostility. Their shared appearance suggested unity, but their body language betrayed unease, as though both were bracing for impact. What few in the room knew was that they had come directly from a private therapy session, one that had peeled back layers neither of them was fully prepared to confront. That session had not resolved their issues, it had exposed them. They entered the party carrying truths too heavy to ignore, yet too volatile to share. As the evening progressed, conversation flowed, laughter rose and fell, and the ritual of gift-giving began, providing a temporary distraction from underlying tensions. It was during this exchange, in a moment meant to symbolize generosity and connection, that everything shifted. Taylor, distracted and emotionally raw, allowed a detail to slip, a fragment of context that did not belong in the light-hearted setting. She referenced a great confession she had made to Deacon, words spoken without calculation, driven by fatigue and the false sense of safety the moment offered. The room did not fall silent immediately, but the energy changed, attention sharpening as curiosity turned to concern. The meaning behind Taylor's words did not require elaboration to be understood. Their implication hung in the air, heavy with possibility. What had she confessed, and why had it required secrecy? Brooke's instincts responded before her mind fully processed the situation. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the warning signal that history was repeating itself in a new form. Ridge, too, sensed the disturbance, his confidence wavering as questions formed faster than he could suppress them. The unspoken truth was clear. Whatever Taylor had admitted to Deacon was significant enough to demand secrecy, and secrets, in this family, had never remained contained for long. The revelation that followed was not delivered with intention, but with inevitability. The confession concerned a betrayal rooted in the past, a choice made under emotional strain, one that had been rationalized, buried, and carried forward without resolution. It was not merely a lapse in judgment, but a truth deliberately withheld, its concealment justified as protection rather than deception. Taylor had believed that silence was the kinder option, that revealing the truth would only reopen wounds best left healed. Yet the act of hiding it had allowed it to fester, transforming it into something far more damaging when exposed. The impact was immediate and far-reaching. Brooke's trust fractured under the weight of implication, her belief in loyalty shaken once again. She did not react with anger at first, but with disappointment sharpened by familiarity. The sense that she was once more on the outside of an inner circle, excluded from knowledge that affected her directly, reignited old insecurities she had worked tirelessly to overcome. Ridge found himself caught between competing loyalties, his instinct to defend clashing with his need for transparency. The foundation of certainty he had built around his relationships began to crumble as he confronted the realization that trust, once broken, never truly returned to its original form. For Deacon and Taylor, the consequences were deeply personal. Their relationship, already strained by unresolved emotions and moral conflict, began to destabilize under the scrutiny of the room. What they had attempted to navigate privately was now subject to interpretation, judgment, and consequence. Deacon felt the familiar sting of being perceived as the catalyst for chaos, the man whose presence complicated lives simply by existing within them. Taylor, burdened by guilt and regret, recognized that her attempt to control the narrative had failed, leaving her exposed in ways therapy alone could not repair. The ripple effects extended beyond the immediate players. Other couples in the room felt the shift, their own insecurities amplified by the unfolding drama. The party, once a symbol of unity, became a mirror reflecting the fractures that had always existed beneath the surface. Every smile now felt strained, every exchange tinged with awareness. The warmth of the setting clashed painfully with the emotional cold settling over the gathering, highlighting the contrast between tradition and reality. As the evening drew to a close, the weight of what had been revealed lingered heavily. No resolution was reached, no reassurances offered that could mend the damage done. Instead, the family dispersed carrying new doubts, forced to confront the possibility that trust, once compromised, demanded more than time to heal. Eric and Donna watched their guests depart with a quiet sadness, understanding that despite their best efforts, the fractures had deepened rather than closed. The Christmas they had hoped would restore balance instead marked the beginning of another period of reckoning. The night ended not with celebration, but with reflection. Each member of the Forrester family retreated into private contemplation, replaying moments, questioning intentions, and reassessing loyalties. The holiday, meant to symbolize peace and renewal, instead illuminated the cost of secrets and the fragility of relationships built on incomplete truths. As the lights dimmed and silence reclaimed the house, it became clear that this Christmas would not be remembered for its warmth, but for the moment when long-buried truths surfaced, reshaping the family in ways none of them could yet fully comprehend. The truth didn't come to Steffy slowly or gently. It hit her like a direct blow, shattering every structure of belief she had painstakingly built about her family, her mother, and the inviolable line between right and wrong she always believed to be. Steffy didn't hear the story in private, nor was she prepared for it. The news reached her like a lingering aftershock from that heavy Christmas night, when wary glances and unusual silences had begun to suggest something was seriously wrong. When the name Deacon was placed alongside Taylor's, no longer a question but an undeniable fact, Steffy felt the ground beneath her feet tremble. For Steffy, the shock wasn't just that her mother had an affair. What stunned her was the object of that relationship, a man connected to so much trauma, mistakes, and turmoil in her family history. Deacon is not a neutral name. He represents chapters Steffy has tried to close, memories she has fought to overcome. The fact that Taylor, who has always been a symbol of healing, morality, and sacrifice, chose Deacon makes Steffy feel as if all familiar rules have been turned upside down. Steffy's initial reaction wasn't anger, but disbelief. She searched for rational explanations, possibilities that would allow her to believe it was just a misunderstanding, an exaggerated moment of weakness. But as the pieces began to fit together, as she recalled Taylor's unusual tension at the party, her averted gaze, and the heavy atmosphere surrounding her mother, the denial crumbled. Steffy was forced to confront the reality that Taylor had not only crossed a line, but had done so consciously and deliberately. The feeling of betrayal rose slowly, but profoundly. Steffy not only felt alienated from the truth, but also felt as if the values she had upheld her whole life were being challenged by the very person who had taught her them. In Steffy, her love for her mother clashed violently with anger and disappointment. She wondered if the lessons about morality, about putting family above personal desires, still held any meaning when Taylor seemed to have chosen the opposite. Taylor, meanwhile, could no longer escape. The truth had come to light, and its consequences were no longer hypothetical, but a reality unfolding before her eyes. Taylor understood Steffy's shock, even feeling the pain like a knife twisting in her own heart. Not a moment passed without Taylor questioning whether she was being selfish, whether the love she felt was worth the price her daughter had to pay. But unlike before in her life, Taylor could no longer turn her back on her feelings by calling it a noble sacrifice. That change didn't come from rebellion, but from exhaustion. Taylor had spent her life being strong for others, suppressing her personal desires in the name of responsibility and morality. She had always been the one to retreat when her emotions threatened to hurt, always the one to choose silence to maintain peace. But this time, that silence had become an unbearable burden. Would continuing to deny her love truly protect her family, or would it only perpetuate a facade disguised as morality? Taylor began to see her relationship with Deacon not through the lens of the past, but through what they had become in the present. To her, Deacon was no longer a symbol of mere chaos, but a man who had confronted his mistakes, his own darkness, and had not fled from it. Their feelings for each other didn't stem from impulsiveness or rebellion, but from a deep understanding, from conversations where neither of them needed to wear a mask. That's what Taylor feared most, because it made this love so real that it was undeniable. The decision to fight for her love didn't come as a grand declaration, but as a painful yet decisive choice. Taylor didn't deny the hurt Steffy was experiencing, nor did she try to justify her actions with empty logic. But she also refused to accept being the default sacrificial lamb, the one who always had to give up to maintain a perfect image in the eyes of others. For the first time in many years, Taylor allowed herself to acknowledge that her happiness also had value, that love wasn't automatically wrong just because it upset someone else. For Steffy, her mother's unwavering resolve only intensified her confusion. She didn't recognize the woman standing before her, not because Taylor had changed, but because Taylor had stopped hiding the parts of herself that Steffy had once tried to conceal. Steffy felt like she was losing a familiar anchor, forced to redefine the image of the mother she had relied on her whole life. She feared that accepting Taylor's choice would force her to acknowledge that the world wasn't as simple as she believed, that the line between right and wrong wasn't always clear. This tension didn't exist in a vacuum. It spread, affecting other relationships, especially how Steffy perceived Deacon. In her eyes, he wasn't just the man her mother loved, but also the one who had contributed to plunging her family into a new crisis. Deacon, though not present during every confrontation, felt the weight of that judgment. He understood that his love for Taylor was inseparable from Steffy's pain, and that this forced him to confront the hardest question: was this love strong enough to survive in a world where it constantly inflicted hurt? When Taylor chose to fight for her love, she didn't do it by denying the past or ignoring its consequences. She did it by confronting them, accepting that this path wouldn't bring quick approval, perhaps never complete approval. But she also understood that continuing to live a life dominated by the fear of disappointing others would only lead to emptiness. For Taylor, the struggle wasn't a fight against her daughter, but a fight against losing herself. That night, as everyone retreated into their own thoughts, the atmosphere remained heavy, as if it had never dissipated. Steffy carried unresolved pain and resentment. Taylor carried a mixture of determination and fear. Deacon carries the realization that this love, if it continues, will demand more than he was ever willing to sacrifice. No one emerges from this confrontation victorious. But neither can anyone return to the person they were before the truth is revealed. The story now revolves not around who is right or wrong, but around how much each person is willing to pay for love, for trust, and for their own identity. And in that tense silence, one thing becomes clearer than ever. This battle has only just begun, and the next choices will shape not only the relationship between Taylor and Steffy, but the future of those caught in this irreversible emotional world.